Hi everyone, my name is Tatsuro Miyatake from Off Topic, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm incredibly excited to be talking to one of my favorite podcasters and VCs, Harry Stebbings from 20VC. Harry runs one of the largest media brands in the venture capital space called the 20-Minute VC, where he has over 180 million downloads and guests from top VCs and startups from around the world. This year in June, he announced that he raised 140 million across 2 funds, and he is, in my mind, one of the best examples of the new generation of venture capitalists, leveraging media into a unique brand and asset. Harry, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the kind words, my friend. That is very kind of you to say, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, a lot of my VC friends here in Tokyo and in Japan listen to your podcast on a weekly basis, but for those who don't know you, can you give a quick intro about yourself and what the 20-Minute VC is?
Yeah, of course. So I saw when I was 13 years old a movie called The Social Network. And there's a scene in the movie where Peter Thiel invests in Facebook with Clarion Capital, his fund at the time. And it was my first exposure to venture capital, and I fell in love with it. I read every blog that I could from the early riders in venture. And then when I was 18, I was staring down, the kind of sight of a law degree, which I desperately did not want to do. And I wanted to be a VC. And so I started the 20-Minute VC from my bedroom with $50. I spent $40 on the microphone, 10 on the domain name. And I realized that I had no other option but to do it now. And that was 7 years ago. We've done 3,000 shows. We have now, as you said, over 180 million downloads, 25 million per month. And we're one of the largest media brands in venture and startups. And then we have 2 funds, most recently this year in June, raised 140, as you said, early in growth. We invest in the best founders around the world.
That is amazing. And I think, from my understanding, you always wanted to be a venture capitalist. Is that correct?
Always. Always makes me laugh when people are like, oh, you kind of fell into it from media. No. I saw 2 big things happen. I saw the commoditization of capital, meaning that personal brand is fundamental for us to win the very best deals. This is what people forget with venture, okay? This is not public markets where being smarter than everyone else is enough, where you just pick the right public market stock. No, you've got to be able to win the deal. This is very, very different. And so brand is crucial. And then also part of that winning the deal is relationships. And the podcast allows you to build these very intimate, in-depth relationships in a way that email or other forms of communication doesn't. And so it was a very clear entry point for me to both build my personal brand and then allow myself to differentiate in what I thought would be an ever-increasingly crowded market.
That is amazing. And let's get into your podcast, because I'm very curious about how you've kind of developed as a podcaster and then as a venture capitalist. So you started your podcast in London when you were 18 with very little connection to Silicon Valley and the tech world. How did you manage to go from there and book, of all guests, Guy Kawasaki as your first guest?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I knew no one. I did not know one single VC, not one single founder in the Valley. And basically, the truth is very few people actually do the work today. Most people are fundamentally actually quite lazy when it comes to the first email. You need to write a short, concise, but also well-articulated and researched email. So I read 3 of his books. I said, hey, Guy, keeping this short out of respect for your time. Page 287, you say this. What did you mean by that? Page 294, you say this. How can you expand on this? And he responded like, wow, super thoughtful, because it showed that I'd done the work up front, which few do. And then he said, listen, love to chat about it more. And I said, great, let's talk about it on my podcast. And then you just need one. You need one for social validity. And then you go and you say to other people, hey, I just had Guy Kawasaki on the show. I'd love to have you on the show. And the flywheel starts. And that's crucial. You need the flywheel to start, and you need the social validity. And so that was how we did it. But it was pretty cool and pretty special to have Guy on first.
I love how you've kind of really epitomized what the VC world is turning into today, which is, it used to be a how can I help you into, actually helping and kind of you and actually doing the work up front in a lot of cases to win deals now. So you've definitely kind of epitomized that. And you famously kind of asked Guy I think all your guests for recommendations in terms of who to talk to next. I think this network that you've built and I don't think it's just introductions, right, is really crucial to Harry Stebbings as a venture capitalist and as a podcaster. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the biggest misconception with us is that we're just a media company. We are actually at our core a data company. So when you look at every VC that we have on the show, our team interviews 5 people or founders in particular, where the VC sits on the board, and they ask 4 specific questions. 1, like, where's the VC move the needle for the company? 2, where are they weakest? And like, there's challenges in that relationship or challenges in that VC. 3 is in terms of most memorable story. And then 4 is the rating that you give them out of 10. Why is this special? It's special because now we have 15,000 data points across 3,000 VCs, where we clearly can see who the best and highest ranked VCs are by their founders. These are like incredible data sources, which allow us to have access and insight into the VC world across a whole generation that I don't think any other data provider has.
No, I absolutely love that, because I think you're not only leveraging your brand and podcast as a way to reach out to different people, but also really go in depth about who is really important in specific industries and in specific markets.
Totally, absolutely, and that's core to it. And it allows us to invest better. It allows us to choose co-investors better. It's core to what we do, actually.
That is incredible. And like, give us a sense on how, in your podcast, how difficult it was to grow. Obviously, media, it's not always hard. It's hard to begin. You're 7 years in now, and you've built up kind of a media empire. But I think at this first year, where were you in terms of downloads? How did you grow? And what, if there was an inflection point, what was it?
It was brutal, to be clear. I mean, the reason why most people don't succeed in content is because they give up. This is very simply a game of who can survive the longest. It's like marriage. It's all about endurance. But my point there is, for the first year, I think we had 2,000 to 5,000 listeners. Probably most of them were my mother. Second year, pretty slow again. And then things started to ramp up quite significantly. I think both podcasting became much more popular. I think venture became much more popular. And then I think, bluntly, with those two both kind of coming into their own, more and more VCs wanted to do shows. More bigger VCs were willing to do shows. And I think it grew because of that. And then, you have the self-fulfilling element of now, we don't do much marketing just because word of mouth is so strong for us. Now we have, we have 2 million plays per show.
Incredible. And talk a little bit about, I think you tweeted this, but you get a lot of inbound requests now from VCs, from startups. How often do you get kind of asked to kind of get VCs on the show? Because a lot of VCs right now are very conscious about how to market themselves, create content as well.
We get 200 requests a week to be on the show.
Wow.
150 or so from PR firms and about 50 or 60 from VCs. I think I've probably only ever taken one that came from that. I don't do that. If you ask to come on the show, it's not how we do this. Bluntly, it's purely based on my interest, where I see the world and the content format going, and then I will reach out kind of directly. And that's how we book the shows. And I think that's the best way to get the best content. And so, yeah, a lot of people do it. I don't like that, and I don't think it leads to the best content. The other thing that, a lot of people don't know, we don't release all the shows. If you think about the podcast is my product. Like any product owner, the podcast is my product. If it's not a great podcast, I'm not going to release the show. It doesn't look good for the guest. It doesn't look great for me. And so we always make sure that we have the highest quality content, and we won't release if we don't have that. And so that's always really important for us.
And you've been very relentless in terms of hounding kind of people you want to talk to. And I know, I've, based on listening to your podcast and based on kind of looking at you kind of tweet and kind of getting to know you, you've contacted a lot of different people for over many, many years. Who was kind of the hardest person for you to get and kind of most satisfying person to get on your show?
Oh, that's a good question. Who was the hardest person? I think Bill Gurley was a challenging one, and I always wanted to have Bill Gurley on the show for sure. Doug Leone, absolutely incredible, who I've wanted to have on the show for a long time. Had him recently. Chris Sacca, again, it took many years to get Chris on the show. It was a fantastic show and loved doing it, but it took many years. I'd say Bill Gurley and Chris Sacca were probably the most challenging by far. And so I would probably highlight those as ones that I really wanted, but it took a long time.
Awesome. The Chris Sacca one, I mean, it was over an hour long. I think it was very unlike you, because I think most of your shows are between 30 to 40 minutes usually. So.
Totally. But that's the other thing. When you have greatness on the show, just let it roll. Like, definitely. Authenticity is key. And this is the other thing. It's like, why do most interviews suck? It's because they mostly suck because they have these like formulaic questions where there's very little conversation. And that's the benefit of VC to VC interviewing, which is like you fundamentally understand it's like inside baseball. The listener is like a fly on the wall.
Right.
And that's, I think, what makes the show very successful. The best interviewers are able to have a schedule and have a structure, but when they find something great, they move off it and they have the mental plasticity to work around the schedule. And then most importantly, and this is what's like determines good from great in interviews, they're able to bring it back to the schedule when that content thread ends or dies. That's a really important point about the best interviewers. Another thing that's important is like being an interviewer taught me to be a VC. And you're like, what? And it's because whenever you interview someone, you have 3 or 4 minutes where you have to make them feel an environment of safety. You have to make them feel non-judged, that this is a place where they can be any form of themselves with you, and you will not judge them, and it's a safe space. It's the same when you meet a founder. You have a very short window at the beginning of that meeting where you can say, hey, you can tell me anything. I don't mind, and this is not a judgmental space. We are here together to come to the best conclusion. And then you will hear about the head of sales that just left, or the CMO that's not working. And that is like fundamental across both interviewing and venture.
No, I absolutely love that. And like, let's actually get into this kind of the art of kind of interviewing, because I'm first of all, I'm learning so much from you just from this conversation. But one thing that I was super impressed with your kind of interviews and your podcast was the kind of breadth of kind of questions that you asked. Both part of it seems prepared, part of it seems kind of very natural, kind of in the moment. How do you kind of prepare for those kind of interviews, and what is the secret in getting kind of guests? You've talked about this a little bit just now, but talking candidly and talking kind of deeply.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I think firstly, talking candidly and talking deeply, we let them know ahead of time that we pre-record the shows. They get sent all of the edits before they go live. So if there's anything that they'd like to change, they absolutely can. Now, very, very rarely does anyone ever change anything. That said, they instantly go, oh, wonderful. Okay, I can be myself. Right. I can say whatever I want. I'm going to have the chance to listen again. Great. And so you make them feel safe in that way. And then in terms of the questions, yeah, I mean, absolutely. We do a load of research. And we talk to many, many references. By the way, it expands my network again. So I say to the guest, hey, who are the 3 people that know you best in this business? And then I do reference calls with them. And I hear the stories about when they did the Series B and how they gained conviction and why they're world-class at hiring head of sales. And you get a huge amount of context. And so when you jump into that conversation, you can be like, hey, I remember hearing that you hired the head of sales for Snowflake. Tell me about that hiring process and how you think about differentiating good versus great in talent that you're hiring. Like, very, very much better than, oh, what secretary are you looking at these days? Which is just crap. And so it allows you to be much, much better and more rigorous. And it allows me to deepen the network. And so I think bluntly, it's all in the research, and you just got to put the time in. And I think that's what very few do.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it really kind of points back to your very first episode with Guy Kawasaki, right? You read 3 of his books. You pointed out specifically which page. I think that kind of shows kind of your work ethic. And that's why, the podcast itself is beloved. So
Those shows were utter crap, though, weren't they? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, when you listen back to them, I listen back to them now. I mean, listen, the guests were fantastic, but I was terrible. And I mean, it goes back to a point, though, that founders need to understand, which is like, one, you will always be embarrassed by your first product, and you should be embarrassed, but ship it. Number two, defensibility. It is a myth. It is a complete myth. By the way, Google or Facebook can copy whatever you do in a day to 10 days with their engineering resources. The fundamental question is, what processes are you building over time to increase your defensibility? When you look at my media company today, good luck trying to copy what we do. We have more than 15 people with thousands of different processes, from the creation side to the editing side to the distribution side. If you want to copy us, there's thousands of little things we do to make us the media company we are. Good luck. Like, I wish you well. But that's the question. I ask this with founders. How are you building defensibility in the little things over time? And I think that's the big thing that I see a lot of founders challenge with, which is like, they don't start because they don't ship, and then they don't build like defensibility repeatably in the processes that they do.
So that's incredible. And I think as you kind of mentioned, the processes there, and kind of really, it's not just the content, right? And the 20-minute VC is really a product, right? And it's you're the entrepreneur. It's not just you being a VC. So I think that's kind of, the mindset you have is very different. But you're also a creator at the same time. And I think one of the things that, as a creator myself, I've kind of struggled with was, you are so much of your brand, right? Harry Stebbings is the face of the brand. And, how difficult is it for you to kind of take a break or kind of separate kind of your emotions from how the company or the fund is performing?
It's impossible. I mean, the truth is, if you want to be, and I'm not saying I'm brilliant in any way, I'm at the start of my career, but if you want to be brilliant and you want to be one of the best, you have to be actually slightly deranged. As one thing that I will definitely take credit for, I am slightly deranged. This is my life, and this is going to be the next 40 years of my life. And I want to build 20 VC into the next great financial institution at the intersection of venture and media. And so the ability for me to segregate the two, no, it's not possible. I am 20 VC and 20 VC is me. Why do I hate going on holiday? Because when you go on holiday, you remove yourself from that entity of 20 VC, and you feel fundamentally quite detached and alone and unsure of yourself. And so I think, honestly, the best probably are a little bit deranged. And I would say it's a challenge for me because, 7 years in, it can be quite tiring, always. But I think, honestly, it's just the way that it is, and it will be for a while at least. And I'm fine with that. I love what I do so much. It doesn't feel like work, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why I asked that, I think you asked a similar question to Stuart from Slack. And I think it might be slightly different because he runs, a bigger kind of organization as opposed to kind of a media brand and a VC. Do you have any thoughts in terms of kind of scaling it beyond kind of your own self?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Yes, I do. I think that there's a lot we can do in terms of building out new verticals, which are coming actually at the start of next year. We've built out the team extensively on the data and the editing sides. I think for me, it's a question of where do I find the highest leverage use of my time? And that's something that I continuously ask myself. We're very lucky. If you think about us in terms of how we help companies, fundamentally, it's about connecting founders and teams to the most relevant and important people in the world in that space. Do you know what? That's a fantastic value add that takes very little time, honestly. It's making introductions, it's making meetings happen, it's helping founders get in the room. Bluntly, that is a way, way more scalable value add than doing product strategy sessions, than doing marketing sessions that take hours and hours. No. We are highly leveraged and highly scalable, and that allows us to do a lot in a short amount of time. And so, that's always crucial, just in terms of where's the highest leverage point in my time.
Amazing. And so let's shift a little bit to, Harry Stebbings as kind of the venture capitalist. And you've tweeted several times about kind of grocery delivery services. I think Getir, Zap, Wheezy. How do you kind of view that kind of last mile, convenience delivery market?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to separate it between emerging markets and between like Western markets. In Western markets, there are some very, very significant challenges to the business model, which I do not see changing, and I actually only see getting worse. And there are three challenges fundamentally for me. It's like customer acquisition costs are incredibly high. The competition is egregious. It makes all billboards, all Facebook ads insanely expensive. So customer acquisition costs super high. Two, driver acquisition costs super high too. There's a lot of different places these drivers can work. This is a real challenge in terms of acquisition and retention as well. I'd put acquisition and retention in the same bucket here. And then also the economics on the actual orders, they're quite low. The AOVs, the average order values, are not very high. They're normally $10 to $12 or $14. It's not great. People are getting Maltesers, which is chocolate, and Coca-Cola. It's not very high. And so actually on a per order basis, you're losing money in most cases, one. And then two, you can't batch deliveries because you have to be under 10 minutes. So that would be a negative network effect, which would be very, very bad for the customer experience. And so you've got this quite flawed business model on the West. And then you go to emerging markets, which is where, I led the Series B with Josh Buckley for Airlift. And this company, fundamentally has none of those problems. It sits in Pakistan and South Africa, where it's just expanded to recently. The competition is bluntly archaic. It does 90-minute deliveries and it's very poor customer experience. And so you're not paying much at all in terms of customer acquisition. The driver acquisition, Airlift pays well. It gives great employer services. This is a very good place to go and work locally. And so you've got great driver acquisition with almost zero cost. And then driver retention is almost zero cost because the drivers are so happy and there's a few other places that are competing to take them as drivers. And then finally, on the average order value side, I mean, the really interesting element is it's not actually that much lower than Western markets. People spend, a close amount, which means that given the unit economics on the driver and customer acquisition, it's a much better business. And so I think, honestly, we're going to see a lot of consolidation in Western markets. I think you're going to see GoPuff win in the US. I also hate interviews where people aren't willing to just say names. So I think GoPuff are going to win in the US. I think Getir are going to win in the UK and Europe. And I think this is going to be a war of cash. Cash is the defensible moat here. It's not in all spaces, but here it is. And those players have the best.
Well, I mean, you heard it here. GoPuff is going to win the West. Getir is going to win the UK. So it's I think this market itself. I think the cash kind of defensibility. It reminds a lot of people about the scooter industry. Some with kind of Uber, Lyft, those kind of industries as well. But it's definitely kind of evolving a lot faster than I kind of imagined. So yeah, I think I think you talked a little bit about Airlift, and I was very curious about that investment. It's in Pakistan, which not a lot of people know that there's a lot of there's some startup activity there. But you've also invested in I think Bridgelinks, which is also in Pakistan, and then you've also invested in companies in Indonesia, and Germany, and Argentina, kind of all over the world. Is there kind of a particular region that you find more compelling, or what is the strategy in terms of looking kind of at startups all over the world?
I mean, to be fair, Bridgelinks is the brother of the founder of Airlift, and so that's how we met him. Very special founding brothers. And I mean, Pakistan, actually, me and Josh did the Series B. Since we did the Series B, Pakistan's pricing has been through the roof. I mean, it's incredible to see how fast that ecosystem has changed. So that's been interesting. Honestly, no. Is there an ecosystem where I'm more excited? No. My job is to invest in the world's best founders anywhere in the world. And when we look at what we have today, which is the largest decentralization of talent that we've ever seen, accelerated further and further by COVID, my job is to fundamentally work with the best entrepreneurs in the world. And that's where I see the media brand. The media brand is my shop sign. It's the shop sign, and it needs to be as big as possible. So if you are two founders in Sao Paulo, Brazil, building a fintech app, great. You think of 20 VC first because you engage with our content for years. If you are two kids building a workflow automation platform in Estonia, you think of 20 VC first. We have to be top of mind, and we have to leverage the content series to be top of mind for these founders. But I don't subscribe to like geographic preference one, and I think that's ever more important now in a world of Zoom. Before actually local players, I thought won much more significantly. Now in a Zoom world, we've seen everyone. LATAM's a great example. Everyone's been doing LATAM very, very hard, and it's just much tougher. And so I think that changes a lot. And then also for me, and it works for some people, so this is just a case by case, but people are always like, oh, what spaces are you excited by? I'm excited by backing the world's best founders who are going to fundamentally revolutionize their industry. I don't have a spaces theory. Come on. And then also, not only that, you have a spaces theory, and then you find something that fits your theory of how this sector will evolve, and you go, yes, that's the one. Maybe your theory was just wrong too. That could be the case, and then you've probably been misinformed. And so for me, it's no, all that matters is being front of funnel for the very best founders in the world, where they consistently will pick me and choose to work with me, and then being able to help them on a very reliable basis. That is all that matters, and that's all that I think about. And anything that takes away from that, I think is non-productive.
Amazing. I absolutely love I think you tied it all in terms of the podcast being the top of mind. You talked about the process and really kind of advancing kind of your ability as a venture capitalist and really building a team. And then you talked about, it's not about categories, it's about different founders. It's about what they, how they think, how their processes are, what their moats are, and really kind of investing all around the world, just, focusing on the best founders in the world. So
totally crucial.
Yeah. I mean, so, we have you on, you end every episode on 20-minute VC with a quick fire.
Sure.
And I wanted to do a quick fire with you. I don't know how often you get that, but
I mean, let's do it, my friend. This will be fun.
Yeah. Usually it starts off with favorite book and why.
Sure, I can do this one. I'll surprise everyone with this one. Madame Bovary, tragic tale of a woman in the French countryside who has these kind of delusions of grandeur, and then, spoiler alert, ends up killing herself. But it's probably one of the most beautiful tales. It sounds very weird when you say that. And it's probably, without a doubt, the book that moved me the most, and I read it every single year before Christmas.
Amazing. Who are your advisors, mentors, and what is the biggest lesson that you've learned from them?
Yeah, that's a very good one. I think, one of my very, very close advisors is a dear friend of mine called Mark Evans. He's taught me so much, but he taught me, especially when it comes to negotiations, you can never argue with fairness. And I think that's always crucial. If something is fair, you can never argue with it. And you can always hold your head up high in negotiations with that. I think that was crucial to me. I think another one that another mentor of mine taught me is no one can ever tell you that you're not good enough. Only you can tell yourself you're not good enough. And even then, this is the most important part, you underestimate yourself. When I started the podcast, I thought I'd be an associate at some fund when I was 25. And that would have really underestimated myself. So don't listen to what other people say you can or can't do. Don't even listen to what you say you can or can't do. Just keep going and persist. And then the final one is fundamentally, nothing's ever as good or as bad as it seems. Stay strong and keep your head up and keep moving.
Those are incredible insights. I'm especially kind of intrigued, and maybe we could talk later about kind of the fairness factor. But in terms of the next question, what is the most satisfying thing about being an investor?
I think for me personally, I'm a very, very big people person. There's numbers people, there's IQ people. I'm all about the EQ. The most satisfying thing for me is when a founder calls me at midnight and says, hey, I just needed someone to chat to, and this is going on and this is going on. And I don't necessarily need your advice, but I just wanted someone to be there for me. And I said, great, let's chat about it. I'm here for you. And I think it's the most satisfying thing for me. Founders know that night or day, I will always be there for them, and I will always fight for them in the trenches. And that is the most important thing they can know.
I think that's one of the best marks of being a good investor is if you're on their kind of speed dial and they'll call you when there's an issue. So yeah. And I think usually end with when you talk to VCs, the usual question of which is your most recent publicly announced investment and why did you say yes and get so excited?
Yeah, I mean, my word, we do quite a lot here. I think probably the most recent was Merge.dev. Incredible female founder, Shenzi. I got introduced to it through a friend of mine, Lee Fixel from Addition. Incredible innovations within the kind of API space. Her and her co-founder also have this very, very unique co-founding pair where they, I think, are brilliant complements to each other. I always ask co-founders when they're on calls together, tell me, what are your co-founders' biggest strengths and your biggest weaknesses? And I'm not having any fake ones. No, they're, too productive. No. I want the real stuff. And they are a brilliant articulation of truly great engineering and sales-led founders who complement each other perfectly. And so, yeah, Merge.dev was the latest. Amazing.
Well, Harry, we're out of time now, and it was amazing to have you on. For everybody listening, make sure you listen to the 20-Minute VC podcast. It is incredible, and you can hear Harry every single week talk to amazing VCs and founders. So thank you for your time, Harry. It's great chatting with you.
Thank you, my friend. Great fun.
Awesome.